Hi, welcome to my blog today. My name is Tom Shu, and today I'm going to show you how to create some bokeh using Christmas lights. Okay, you may have heard of bokeh. You know, it's that out of focus blur, and I've talked about this in previous tutorials. And if you don't have a really fast lens, it's hard to get this really cool bokeh. So if you're looking at this Christmas tree, you can see it's just, first of all, you can tell a couple things by looking at the image. When you see those really big star brights, you know, those pin lights that have the little star points off of it, that tells you it was shot at a really low aperture. When you look at one that has star points like this is kind of like a middle of the range aperture. Let's let it load up. You see how those points aren't there? And let's pull up the info and look and see. This one was shot at f2.2, okay? This is a 85-1.2, so it's a really fast lens. But look what happens when we shoot at 16. You see how we get those points? Well, this is kind of unique to know because these little points of light are going to turn into bokeh balls. When you defocus your lens, this is what happens. And depending on what aperture you have set, a really small aperture, you're going to get smaller bokeh balls. So we can see them here. And depending on the aperture you have, like how many bladed aperture, will determine how many sides of the circle there are. Now, if you have a really fast lens, like an 85-1.2, you'll get these crazy circle balls that fill the whole screen. Again, this shot at wide open. Well, this lens is, over $2,000. And what can you do to create something similar to that? These make neat backdrops when you're out taking pictures of Christmas lights. I'm just using a Christmas tree as an example, but a bunch of multicolored lights, and you throw your lens out of focus, you can make some neat stuff. But you really don't have to throw it out of focus because you can make it inside Photoshop. If you have Photoshop CS6, I'm going to show you how you do it. So we're going to grab one of these images. We're going to send one over to Photoshop. And we're going to do that by hitting Control E or Command E on a Mac. And when you do that, it's going to load up inside Photoshop. So there we are. We're loaded in Photoshop. So we always want to start off by making a duplicate layer as a safety net. To do that, we're going to hit Control J or Command J on a Mac. So now we have our new layer. Now inside Photoshop CS6, they've got these new blur filters. So if you go Filter, Blur, Field Blur, okay? And what it will do is it lets you set a point for your blur, and if you move this filter to the right, you can set how much blur you have. So you can see that we can render that really, really blurry and out of focus, a lot like the 85 did. Now, another interesting thing you'll notice down here is called light bokeh. Okay. Now, this light bokeh allows you to take those points of light and render them, render them as a large ball. Okay, so you can determine the size of the ball by the amount of blur you add. Okay, so now you can see that we're getting something similar to the 85 was doing. And if you use this too much, you'll notice it'll get too bright. Well, say once you've got it bright the way you like it, you can determine how bright and what stays bright by using this light range. If you move it to the right or to the left, you can manipulate what colors stay in focus, or I should say, what balls stay bright and which ones don't. Okay, so when you get something similar to what you think you want, then you just click OK up here on the menu. Okay, and you can also color the bokeh. So if I wanted to add some of the room temperature or just color the balls up some, because I had some colors underneath, this is something that I can't do inside of an 85-1.2. I can't change the color of the bokeh, and I can't change the size of the balls other than what's available with that lens when I throw it out of focus. This, I have full control over the size and the blur. Just like this. I know I can dial my lens in and out to get these bokeh balls to render nice and easy, but this can save you too when you're creating those nice bokeh images. So I don't have a reference image to look at. I'm going to pull the color off. Maybe add just a little bit so it's warmer. Okay, and I'm going to play with this, just see if my memory serves me correctly. And no, it wasn't that bright. Okay, so something like this. So let's look at Lightroom and see what we did. We'll pull it up. There's the 8512. Let's close this. And let's look at the Photoshop version. So it's very similar. Let's click OK. And it takes a second to build that layer. It's very labor intensive on their processor to use that blur filter. So we'll let that run for a minute. And I'll show you some things you could do with adjustment layers to get it to match a little better. I'll pause the video and let it go. Okay, we just finished the blurring, and let's pull up Lightroom again to see what it looks like, and it's looking pretty close. Photoshop again, and maybe we need to change the contrast and brightness. So we'll just do that. We'll add an adjustment layer, and we can make it brighter or darker, and we can adjust the contrast. We can add more or take some away. So I think we need to take some away because the background's a little bit creamier with the 85. So let's pull up Lightroom again, and looks like we need to crop in a little bit too, because there are two different images and I think I placed them differently. So let's do that too. We'll crop in. We'll grab our crop tool. The great thing about Photoshop CS6 with the crop tool, it doesn't delete the pixels unless you say delete pixels. Okay, so there we are. We cropped it. And let's pull back up Lightroom. And it looks pretty darn close. Being able to use any lens to capture Christmas lights and render them in really soft bokeh, similar to what an 85 1.2 can, that's a wonderful thing to be able to do inside Photoshop. So I want to thank you all for taking time to visit my blog today. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. And until next time, we'll see you soon.